Hi, and welcome back. Today we're going to revamp this old Regency Style dresser I bought at an auction. The first step is to properly clean everything with a good degreaser or sugar soap. That way you do not work caked in dirt or grease into your piece when sanding or stripping it. Once that is done, we want to remove all the hardware for later cleaning and to make it easier to process drawers and doors. This is not an original period piece, but a replica from around the 1980s. It is still beautifully crafted and has a gorgeous mahogany veneer hidden under this thick layer of lacquer. To cut down on sanding time, we continue with applying copious amounts of stripper to every surface we want to keep a raw wood look on. And I like to emphasize here that if you are stingy now, you will pay the price later, meaning that if you apply too little of your stripper, it will dry out and become an ungodly mess that is a pain to remove. You usually will need to repeat this process 2 or 3 times, depending on how thick the layer is you want to remove. I will let this sit for about an hour, checking in between to make sure it does not dry out and reapply if more is needed. Then I will take a scraper of some description to scoop the goop. If it is metal like the one I am using, make sure to be careful as not to damage the veneer. I like to scrape directly into a container to keep the mess to a minimum and work on top of a plastic sheet that I can throw out afterwards. Once that is done, you want to carefully read the instructions for the product you are using. In this case, I only need to wash off the remaining stripper with water and soap. Others might require a vinegar wash. Once everything has properly dried, we move on to sanding. This particular veneer is of good quality and not as thin as some on newer pieces might be. We don't want to take any chances, so you want to be extra careful as not to burn through while sanding. For that we want to use no lower starting grit than 120 and adjust the speed on the orbital sander to mid or slow. From here we go with increasingly finer grits, going to 180, 240 and then 320. Your final grit depends on the finish you will apply. For regular wipe-on or spray-on polyurethane, 240 would be enough. But since I'm going to apply my custom oil polymix, I might even go as far as a 400 grit. In between grits, I like to wipe down everything with a mineral spirit soaked lint-free cloth. That way I am sure to avoid grinding sawdust into the next layer and minimize risk of swirl marks. Just let the mineral spirits fully evaporate before moving on to the next grit. As for the hardware, this is brass and has about 40 years worth of dirt on it. That is an easy fix in most cases though. All I'm going to do is add everything to a pot of boiling water with a very generous helping of vinegar and let that sit for about an hour. After that, I will use a wire brush to give it a good cleaning. You can repeat this process until you are happy with the result. The rest of the hardware I remove is not brass. To have a matching look, I will use some Robin Buff in antique gold, which I apply with a brush and let dry. Since I am going to paint the sides and the base of the dresser, I only need to scuff sand everything with 120 grit sandpaper to make sure my primer properly adheres. I don't want to buy a dark primer, so I tinted the one I have grey. Doing this means I will have to use less paint for full coverage. I will leave a link for my how to tint primer video in the description. I applied 2 coats before moving on to my paint color. I'm using Fusion Mineral Paint in Coal Black. It has great coverage and levels out nicely. To have optimal coverage, I apply 3 thin layers. To have that silky smooth finish, make sure to lightly sand with a 240 or 320 grit between every coat of primer and paint once fully dry, except of course your last coat. Fusion usually has a built-in top coat, but I went over everything with my mixture anyway for a bit of added protection and shine. In between coats, I will tend to some of the veneer damage with furniture touch-up markers. They are easy to use and come in various shades. Simply blend the colors until it matches the rest of the veneer and you are happy with the result. I will also replace the very grimy felt liner of the top drawer. They can be hard to remove and some people will pour boiling water over it to achieve that. However, I do not like to do that as you never know what wood is underneath or if you end up giving your drawer water damage. Instead, I will either use a hairdryer or an iron on medium heat and no steam setting. This liner was relatively easy to remove and I just have a few stubborn pieces on the sides left. I'll place a towel between the iron and the drawer to protect the wood. The goal is to soften the glue for easy removal and many roads lead to Rome, so choose whatever way is easiest for you. When the glue is sufficiently soft, I have an easy time removing the little bits and bobs with tweezers or my X-Acto blade. Finally, one of the most satisfying parts, applying my oil polymix. It is a lengthy process but well worth it. You want to apply the mixture with a lint-free rag and give it 24 hours to properly absorb and dry. Repeat this process 2 or ideally 3 times over the next couple of days and you won't regret the result. On the 4th day, apply the oil wax mixture in a thin layer with an abrasive sponge. Wipe off any excess and give it another 24 hours to dry. This gives you the best combination of protection from polyurethane, richness of oil, and the buttery smoothness of wax. If you're curious about the recipe for this mixture, I will leave a link in the description, so go check it out. And while you are at it, do hit that like and subscribe button. When all the hard work is done, it is time to finally reassemble everything. Now one last reminder of what we started with before the final reveal. Thank you very much for sticking with me while giving this dresser some much needed love. I'm sure it will find a new home soon, in which it can hopefully spend a decade or two and live a good life. Let me know what you think in the comments. Have a great day and hope to see you in the next video.